Elara thought she was adopting an unusually large domestic cat, a unique addition to her household. But when she decided to get a checkup for her new pet, the veterinarian's reaction was anything but typical. As he examined the cat, his eyes widened in surprise. "I'm so sorry," he said, reaching for his phone, "but that's not a cat, and I have to notify the authorities." Elara gasped upon hearing what the vet just told her. This had to be a mistake, or some kind of stupid joke. "I'm sorry, what are you talking about?" she asked, feeling confused, but the vet did not even listen to her. Dr. Stevens had already left the room, leaving Elara and her cat Cleo alone. What was going on? Her mouth fell open as she stared at the door in complete disbelief. She didn't understand what just happened. The vet had obviously gotten it all wrong. Cleo was a cat, and the authorities had no reason to get involved with her. At least that was what Elara thought. She would soon find out the truth, and it would shock her to her core. "What do I do now? Do I sit here and wait, or do I just leave?" she asked herself while petting Cleo. "I won't let them do anything to you, okay?" she whispered. She did not feel good about the whole situation, and when Dr. Stevens did not return for several minutes, she got up, deciding to go home. However, just as she was about to walk out of the office, Dr. Stevens returned. "Where are you going?" he asked, and upon hearing that she was leaving, he said, "I'm sorry, but I don't think that's a good idea. The police are on their way." Elara turned pale, and her shock suddenly turned into anger. "No, you can't keep us here. We are leaving." She took Cleo and reached for the door handle when Dr. Stevens blocked her way. "Elara, I'm truly sorry, but I'm afraid I cannot let you leave. The police will be here soon," he said. Elara tried pushing herself past him, but it was no use. "Well, what do I care? What do they want from me? I'm not letting them take Cleo." Dr. Stevens tried calming her down, but Elara was only getting more riled up. She was very protective of her cat, and Dr. Stevens was getting impatient, thinking he would not be able to keep Elara from leaving much longer. Just at the right moment, his office door opened and a police officer appeared on the doorstep. "Officer, you're finally here," the vet exclaimed. "Good day. I'm Officer Dan. We spoke on the phone. Ma'am, I'm afraid I need to take you to the station. There are some questions I would like to ask you," he said as he turned to Elara. She stared at him, confused, not understanding why this was happening. Why? I haven't done anything wrong, have I?" she asked. The officer did not respond to her question. "We'll discuss that at the police station. Now please, come with me. And bring Cleo," he firmly said. Elara knew that there was nothing she could do. She could try to run, but Cleo was too heavy to carry with her, and moreover, she was outnumbered. She realized that she had no other choice but to follow the officer. Half an hour later, Elara found herself in the interrogation room with Officer Dan. They had locked Cleo in a cage in the meantime, to keep her safe. Elara hated it, but she understood that now was not the time to cause trouble about it. She still had no idea why she was even here in the first place, but she was soon about to find out. "So, Elara, you understand that we have some questions about Cleo, your cat. I'm curious to know, where did you get her?" the officer asked. Elara explained that she had adopted Cleo from a local shelter some months ago. "I still have the documentation if you're interested in seeing it." The officer nodded and asked for some more details about the adoption. Elara told him all the details and then finally asked a question herself. "Why do you want to know all this? Is there something wrong?" The officer sighed and said he was not really allowed to share that information with her yet. He immediately continued asking questions about Cleo, such as, "When did you notice that she was getting so big?" "Well, I adopted her when she was a kitten, but she was already quite large for her age then. When I brought her home, I noticed that she only kept growing and growing. That's when I decided to take her to the vet to see if this was normal. I mean, I don't mind at all, but I just hadn't expected it," she explained. "I see," Officer Dan said. He asked her some more questions, and finally he told her, Thank you, Elara. You are free to go now. We'll be in touch if we need anything else, and please do send me those adoption documents. She stood up, shook his hand, and asked to see Cleo, but Officer Dan had some shocking news for her. Cleo has to stay here, at least until the investigation is finished. I wish I could tell you what would happen to her, but the truth is, it's not up to me. I have no idea, he told her. Elara felt the rage bubbling up inside her again, but she realized that she'd not be able to change his mind. She had to take matters into her own hands. She nodded and asked, "Okay, I understand, but I just want to say goodbye to her for now. Can I at least see her before I leave?" Of course, the officer could not deny her this, so he led her to the room where Cleo was held. Someone called him for another urgent matter, and he told Elara, "I'm sorry, I must leave. I trust you will find your own way out?" She nodded and put on her most innocent smile. "Of course, officer, thank you." However, she had a plan. Of course, she wasn't going to leave this place without Cleo. Who knows what they would do to her? Besides, nobody had even told her what was actually going on. She looked around the room and quickly found a key. It can't be this easy, she thought to herself as she picked it up. However, the key fit right into Cleo's cage, and Elara immediately went into action. She did not waste a single second. She took off her sweater, wrapped it around Cleo, and grabbed her as she ran out of the room. She had left her car at the vet's office, so she walked home as fast as she could. And to her surprise, nobody came after her. Elara was relieved to have made it back home with Cleo, but she was also worried. They would certainly come looking for her once they realized she was gone. And she'd be in trouble. She needed to find a place to stay until this whole situation, whatever it was, died down. But it wouldn't be that easy to hide such a giant cat. She still had no idea why the police wanted Cleo and why they had asked her all those questions. She only knew one thing, and it was that she needed to keep Cleo safe. So, she contacted a friend and asked if Cleo could stay with them for a while, without them telling anybody. Luckily, her friend was willing to help her and immediately came to get Cleo. It was just in time. Only minutes after Cleo left, the police were knocking at Elara's door. "Elara, we know you have taken Cleo. You could get in real trouble for this, you know. Open the door immediately." Elara felt dapper as she marched to the door and faced the cops. She told them she wouldn't tell them anything until they explained to her what was going on. Standing firm, Elara's voice cracked with a mixture of anger and desperation. "You're not being honest with me, officer. Cleo isn't just any cat, is she?" Her determined gaze pinned Officer Dan in place. He looked away momentarily, conflicted, before meeting her gaze once more. The air was thick with tension, and it became evident that Officer Dan was grappling with something deeper than just protocol. He shifted in his seat, his years of police work clashing with the personal connection he felt to Elara's case. "Elara," he began slowly, his voice filled with an unmistakable weight. "I've been doing this job a long time, and there are moments I wish information could stay hidden." His sigh echoed the room's dim lighting, hinting at a story yet to be told. Taking a deep breath, Officer Dan began to unravel the mystery. "It's not common knowledge, but there have been cases, whispers really, about animals not being ordinary." Elara's brow furrowed, urging him to continue. "Cleo, she's unique, different. There's more to her than meets the eye, and there are people, powerful people, who are very interested in her." The weight of the revelation bore down on Elara. A torrent of emotions played across her face: confusion, disbelief, and fear. "You're telling me my Cleo is... what? Some sort of experiment? A pawn in someone's twisted game?" She clutched the edge of the table, her knuckles turning white. The walls seemed to close in on her as the magnitude of the situation became clear. Regaining her composure, Elara's resolve hardened. "Then it's clear what I have to do. I'll get to the bottom of this. For Cleo, for myself." Officer Dan's eyes widened slightly, admiration evident. "You might be up against forces bigger than you can imagine," he warned. Elara nodded, determination burning in her eyes. "Then let them come. I won't back down." The drive to the shelter was filled with nervous energy as Elara's mind raced with the possibilities. The faded sign of the Sunnyside shelter greeted them. James parked, and they both exchanged a quick glance before heading inside. This was where Cleo's journey with Elara began. Memories of their first meeting washed over her. She had to uncover the truth. Inside, the familiar smell of animals and cleaning agents filled the air. Elara approached the reception, James beside her. "We're looking for information on a cat named Cleo," she began, her voice unwavering. The woman behind the counter hesitated before calling over an older staff member, Mrs. Thompson. As the minutes passed, Elara and James fired question after question, searching for any clue about Cleo's past. Mrs. Thompson took a deep breath, brushing a stray hair behind her ear. "We found Cleo abandoned near the railway tracks. She was in a terrible state. We took her in, cared for her, and eventually put her up for adoption." Elara's gaze was searching, but Mrs. Thompson's eyes held only genuine concern and a touch of sadness. "That's all we know, dear." The ambient noise of the shelter seemed to fade as Elara stared deep into Mrs. Thompson's eyes. Those eyes, lined with age and experience, held a deep sincerity. They weren't hiding anything. Elara's instincts told her the shelter was in the clear, and her heart ached with both relief and frustration. James placed a comforting hand on her shoulder, sensing her emotions. As they left the building, the weight of uncertainty pressed down on them. The shelter was just one piece of a complex puzzle. James looked at Elara. If it wasn't the shelter, then where did Cleo really come from? Elara's gaze was distant, filled with determination. "I don't know," she whispered, "but I'm going to find out, no matter what it takes." The city's hustle and bustle enveloped Elara and James as they ventured into the maze-like alleys near the railway tracks. Each corner held potential clues, every shadow a mystery. Elara tried to envision where Cleo might have been abandoned, her eyes scanning every nook and cranny. James, on the other hand, kept a lookout for anyone who might have seen something on that fateful day. James's phone rang, breaking the silence. The number was unknown. With a puzzled look, he answered, "Hello?" A distorted voice spoke, "Stop looking where you shouldn't." Elara's heart raced. She motioned for James to put the call on speaker. "Who is this?" James demanded, his grip tightening on the phone. The voice continued, "All you need to know is that Zephyr Inc. had interests in many places. Perhaps Cleo was one of them." The line went dead. Both stood in stunned silence. Zephyr Inc.? The name sounded familiar, but felt just out of reach in Elara's memory. They needed to find out more. Determined, Elara took out her phone and quickly began searching for information on Zephyr Inc. James looked on. "We're on to something big, aren't we?" he whispered. Elara nodded. "And whoever that caller was, they've just given us our next lead." The evening sun cast long shadows as they set out to uncover the secrets of Zephyr Inc., hoping it would bring them closer to Cleo's story. Sitting in a dim coffee shop, Elara and James scoured the internet for information on Zephyr Inc. The company's public records painted a facade of pharmaceutical innovations and biotech breakthroughs. But the deeper they delved, the murkier the waters became. There were connections to offshore accounts and shadowy shareholders whose identities remained hidden. Forums and unofficial websites hinted at the company's involvement in unauthorized genetic research. Whispers of unethical trials and clandestine operations filled their screens. A comment caught Elara's eye. "They play with life itself, with no regard for nature's boundaries." It sent shivers down her spine. What was Zephyr Inc. truly up to? Knowing they needed more tangible evidence, the duo decided a physical visit to Zephyr Inc. S main research facility was necessary. James acquired a set of security blueprints, while Elara got hold of some basic surveillance equipment. They went over their plan meticulously, ensuring every possible exit and entrance was accounted for. Under the veil of darkness, Elara and James approached the looming structure. Using a security code they had intercepted, they made their way into the belly of the facility. Hushed whispers and distant footsteps echoed in the corridors. They had to remain undetected, each step a calculated risk. As they ventured deeper, Elara stumbled upon a dimly lit room filled with shelves of documents. Her pulse quickened when her gaze settled on a file labelled Project Cleo. Trembling, she opened it. Photographs, charts and notes revealed a story that was both heartbreaking and horrifying. The file confirmed Cleo was no ordinary cat, but the depth of Zephyr Inc. S' involvement was still to be unravelled. Tears welled in Elara's eyes as she pored over the file. The documents showed a myriad of experiments done on Cleo: genetic splicing, hormonal alterations, and even neural modifications. It wasn't just a quest to enhance a creature's physical capabilities, but to control its very essence. Cleo, it seemed, had been Zephyr Inc. As prized project, their foray into a brave new world. Flipping through other folders, the duo's horror intensified. Rows of photographs showcased animals of various species, each bearing a distinct mark indicating they had undergone similar experiments. Some looked eerily intelligent. Others seemed mutated, bearing physical signs of their ordeal. It was clear that Cleo was just the tip of the iceberg in this house of horrors. Placing the files back, Elara's voice trembled with emotion. "We have to get them out, James. All of them." Taking a deep breath, she looked him squarely in the eyes. "I won't let this company play God and sentence these creatures to a life of misery. We need a plan." James nodded in agreement, his resolve matching hers. The sudden blare of alarms shattered their moment of determination. Red lights flashed and the intercom barked, "Security breach detected in Sector C." Panic surged through them. Their covert operation was compromised. Distant shouts and footsteps grew steadily louder, echoing the facility's intent to apprehend the intruders. With no time to think, Elara and James sprinted through the winding corridors, dodging security personnel and avoiding dead ends. Every turn, every doorway became a potential trap. Relying on their earlier preparation, they located a service exit. Gasping for breath and heart pounding, they burst into the night, evading the clutches of Zephyr Inc., at least for now. Just as they thought they'd made their getaway, a pair of bright floodlights blinded them. Elara and James froze. Surrounding them were the company's security personnel, their faces stern and weapons trained. "Thought you could outsmart us, didn't you?" a voice sneered. It was a trap, and they had walked right into it. The sterile metallic walls of the confinement cell were cold to the touch. Elara and James sat on a hard bench, their hands cuffed, the weight of their predicament pressing down on them. "We need to find a way out," Elara whispered, her determination unwavering despite their grim surroundings. James nodded, deep in thought. "You remember when I mentioned my contacts in covert operations?" James asked, his voice barely audible. Elara leaned in, intrigued. "I've worked with them on several undercover missions. We have ways of communicating without being detected." Elara's eyebrows shot up in surprise, realizing that James had depths she hadn't fathomed. To bolster their spirits, James regaled Elara with tales of his past missions, close shaves, incredible heists, and last-minute escapes. Each story was a testament to human ingenuity and resilience. As Elara listened, hope began to kindle in her heart. "We've made it out of worse," James finished with a confident smirk. "We'll make it out of this." Pooling their knowledge and experiences, the duo began crafting a plan. It involved misdirection, exploiting the facility's security weaknesses, and a bit of old-fashioned luck. Every detail and every possible scenario was considered and strategized. They were resolved. If there was even the slightest chance of breaking free, Elara and James were going to take it. The dim glow from a passing torch revealed two guards deep in hushed conversation outside the cell. "The boss wants the experiments expedited," one murmured. The other chuckled. "Can't wait to see what those beasts can do." Elara's heart raced. These were not just business plans, they hinted at something far more sinister. James discreetly removed a tiny device from his shoe, activating it with a swift motion. Moments later, a distant explosion echoed through the facility. Lights flickered, and guards rushed past their cell, drawn to the source of the commotion. This was their window. Working quickly, Elara and James managed to unlock their handcuffs using a makeshift lockpick. Alarms blared, casting a red hue over the facility. Guards scrambled in confusion, shouting orders and securing perimeters. Amid the chaos, Elara and James, hooded and masked, moved with purpose. Their familiarity with the layout, thanks to the maps they had studied, allowed them to avoid major patrol routes. Reaching a high-security lab, they found a trove of documents, videos, and experimental data. It was all there, the depths of the company's experimentation. Elara quickly transferred as much data as she could onto a compact drive. They now had the evidence they needed to expose the company's vile undertakings. Passing by rows of cages, their hearts broke at the sight of countless animals in distress. They couldn't leave them. Working fast, they unlocked as many cages as possible, releasing animals and causing further mayhem. With the creatures free and the building in chaos, Elara and James sprinted toward the exit, the evidence and their mission driving them forward. Underneath the canopy of a dilapidated warehouse, Elara and James found refuge. The adrenaline started to wear off, replaced by the gravity of their situation. "We've got them," James whispered, clutching the compact drive. Elara nodded, her thoughts racing. They needed to act swiftly before the company caught up with them. James pulled out a burner phone, dialing numbers with a sense of urgency. Conversations were brief but meaningful. The network of contacts he'd cultivated over the years was vast. A coalition of investigative journalists, whistleblowers, and tech specialists were all ready to dissect and expose the company's dark secrets. In the muted light of their hideout, the pair spent hours sifting through files, videos, and testimonies. There was a paper trail leading straight to the top echelons of the company. Elara's hands shook as she saw the extent of the experiments. This evidence, meticulously compiled, was their silver bullet. Within days, headlines screamed out the revelations. Footage from inside the facility was broadcast on primetime news, sending shockwaves through the nation. Protests erupted outside the company's headquarters. Social media was ablaze with hashtags demanding justice. The court of public opinion had already passed its judgment. High-profile lawyers, many working pro bono for the cause, locked horns with the company's legal team. The courtroom became a battleground. The evidence was irrefutable, but the company had deep pockets and a vested interest in avoiding the fallout. It was David versus Goliath, with Elara and James at the forefront, fighting for justice. The courtroom was charged with tension. As the prosecution unveiled their findings, gasps echoed through the benches. Videos of the facilities played, forcing attendees to confront the harrowing reality. Elara, with tears in her eyes, gave a heartfelt testimony while James presented the technical details. The defense tried to refute it, but the evidence was undeniable. Outside, the streets thrummed with activity. Crowds carrying placards shouted slogans, demanding justice for the innocent animals. Vigils were held, candles illuminating the night. The world watched, and public figures voiced their support. Every day, the momentum grew, turning the issue into an international cause. Despite their best efforts, the company's defense started to falter. Key witnesses defected, revealing more of the corporation's shady dealings. Internal memos and emails, now public, painted a damning picture. The defense's arguments grew weaker, their narrative riddled with holes. After weeks of deliberations, the verdict was in. The gavel came down hard on the company, signaling their downfall. Massive fines were levied, Top executives faced jail time, and the facilities were ordered to shut down immediately. Cheers erupted outside the courthouse. Justice had prevailed. The aftermath saw a massive rescue operation. Animals, once subjects of experiments, were gently ushered into new lives. Rescues and sanctuaries opened their doors, providing care and rehabilitation. Elara, in particular, took several into her care, determined to give them a second chance at life. The story of their bravery became a beacon of hope, reminding all of the power of persistence and heart. A few weeks after the trial, as Elara sat in her garden sipping her morning tea, a figure approached. Dressed in a lab coat with wary eyes, the man hesitated before speaking. "Elara, I've been following the case. I have something you need to know about Cleo." The man introduced himself as Dr. Alan Morley, the chief geneticist behind Project Cleo. Cleo was initially our attempt to study the genetic makeup of hybrids, specifically between a giant Maine Coon and a wildcat. Our intentions were purely scientific and aimed at conservation. We wanted to understand the adaptability of species in changing environments. But as our research progressed, the company saw potential profit. Their greed overshadowed our primary objective. The hybrid species, particularly Cleo, demonstrated traits they believed had commercial value. Pressure mounted, and the project took a dark turn. That's when the illegal experiments began. Dr. Morley's voice quivered with regret. Pulling a small vial from his pocket, Dr. Morley handed it to Elara. "This is a stabilizing serum. Cleo's unique genetics means her growth and health could be unpredictable. This serum will help ensure she leads a normal, healthy life without any complications." Elara took the vial. Gratitude is evident in her eyes. With the serum in hand, Elara returned home, looking at Cleo with renewed hope. She was determined, now more than ever, to protect and love Cleo, providing a sanctuary away from the world's prying eyes. As the sun set, Elara and Cleo sat together, the promise of a brighter future tea.